I
something.
I think my first memories of the junior school playground, there was a sort of gallery up the bank of along the classrooms, and then you went down the bank or down the steps onto that playground, with the tennis courts marked out and the brick wall that we used to play marbles against. Yeah, I think that's it. It's the grounds more than the people. Yeah, I'd been to a year of nursery school at the Rudolf Steiner, um, next to Rondebosch Commons. And so I had that behind me. I seem to remember my mother saying that I was the teacher's favorite. So maybe she looked after me and I wasn't, but I don't have any traumatic memories of first going to school. I do remember that feeling of putting on your uniform, your new uniform. And your little cardboard suitcase. There were bad ones, namely that Oosthuizen bastard. But I was never in his class. But I think I had Mr. Hubert, who was kind of down at the Michaelis house.
J.E. de
That
Villiers,
was in you what? Sorry.
J.E. de Villiers' house was the junior school boarding school.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we spent 1 year there because I suppose there weren't enough classrooms at the main building. And yes, I remember that quite clearly because of beautiful trees, beautiful garden, the swimming pool. Yes, I got a lot of memories of that. I've got memories of, I think it's Mr. Hubert,
Mm.
not allowing us to leave the class. Or he'd say, right, it's time to go home. Everyone pack up, sit at your desks. And then he'd call one person out and he'd drop a pin on the floor, or he'd get the person to drop a pin. And somebody in the class had to be able to hear that. That's how quiet it had to be. Then you could go. But he wasn't a bad teacher. He wasn't a bad guy. He had a sense of humor. And then the other teacher that I liked was Mr. Henschel, because he was gentle. And I only had him for probably half a year because we went off to America for a year, and then during Standard 4. And so when I came back, I was in Standard 5 with Mr. Henschel, or Henschelwood. What was his name?
Henschel.
Can't remember.
Henschel.
And Henschel, yeah. Yeah, and he wasn't a bad guy either.
Mm. What was going to America in the middle of school?
Yeah, I mean, my dad packed the whole family up. There were three of us, three kids, or was there already a fourth? I can't remember. I think just three. And we spent 1 year near Washington, D.C., where he was working. And it was very formative. Schooling there, looking back through the magazines, the school magazines, I'm really impressed with the quality of the written work that was produced by the kids. I bet you kids today can't write that stuff. I mean, most of them can't write, and they certainly don't get taught English grammar. So we had good schooling, but America was very good too. It was heavy on science, and there was only one language, English. There was civics. Oh, the other thing about it, there was a heavy emphasis on public speaking. I think it was at least once a week you had to stand up in front of the class and give a little 2 to 3 minute talk, which definitely didn't happen in South Africa.
Michael, what kind of school did you go to when you were in the States? Was it a public school or was it a private
Yeah.
school?
Oh,
Was it
yeah.
public,
No,
a
no, no, no.
standard,
It was
bog
Bethesda
standard
Elementary.
elementary school?
Bethesda Elementary School, it was called, in Maryland. And it's still there. I looked it up on the map. The house that we stayed in is still there.
The catchment area was upper middle class, I assume.
Yes, it was at the time. I think it's gone downhill quite a bit just looking at it now. But yes, no, it was a good area. It was a nice house, and we had neighbors with a huge house and a pool they would allow us to swim in. And there was certainly no trouble in the streets. My daughter grew up in America, and she went to something called a magnet school. And a magnet school is a school for gifted kids, not genius kids, although the geniuses go there, but any kid that's clearly in the top 5% go to a magnet school. And it's often located within a big high school, but it's got dedicated teachers and a much more advanced curriculum. And I sat in on a couple of her classes once when I visited. I was absolutely gobsmacked by what these 11-year-olds were talking about. discussing poetry, discussing politics. It was absolutely amazing. And in New Zealand, that is absolutely frowned upon, to take clever kids and give them special treatment. And it's a major fault of this country and the system. There's a sort of aggressive egalitarianism here. If you're looking after the good people, then obviously you're ignoring the bad people, and that's not good enough. Yes, I think America possibly awakened an interest in science, which may not have happened. In America, they've got they call it summer school, because you're off school for 2 to 3 months. And you can do these publicly funded courses, or maybe they cost $20 or something, whatever they were. And I did one on astronomy, as an 11-year-old. I don't think that would have happened in South Africa. Just, I suppose, adaptability. It might have taught me a bit of that, because I've done a lot of traveling and working around the world in my time. And I adapt very quickly. I don't hanker after, the way things were. Charge out where angels fear to tread and just go for it.
How did your teenage years feel in the senior school?
Yeah, I think I was a very young, I don't know if immature is the right word, but I wasn't, put it this way, I didn't have a girlfriend at high school. My first girlfriend was at university. And I remember something happened at the end of Standard 6, where I suddenly switched over into wanting to do really well at school. I don't know what it was, but I went from sort of middle of the class to up there, second or first, depending on the subject. And I really enjoyed cracking the subjects and being in charge of the knowledge. So for me, that was a big part of school. And I was also a loner. I mean, I had my 3 friends, Shamovitz, Tom Coates, and William Clark. But weekends, I spent most of my time alone or up the mountain. I had one friend that I used to go mountain climbing with, rock climbing. But most of the time was up in the forest by myself, to be honest.
So that would have...
Well, there was always Mike Witston ahead of me. On the 1 or 2 occasions when I beat him, it was a very memorable thing. He didn't want to be seen as a swot. He wanted to be one of the boys. Whereas I was quite happy to be seen as whatever anybody wanted to see me as. I did what I wanted.
You said you had your first girlfriend at university.
Yeah.
And what did you went to?
And she picked me, not vice versa.
She what?
She picked me, not vice versa. I was so shy. I remember there was this one girl who lived down up at the top of Mount Road, and I had to walk down Mount Road to get to home. And the worst possible thing she went to Westerford. The very worst possible thing that could happen was that I'd turn the corner into Mount Road and see her at the bottom walking up towards me. I died 1,000 deaths. If I hadn't been so proud, I would have turned around and walked back the way I'd come. So no, I was terminally shy. Was she an occupational therapist? Yeah, there's been a long road. Because I did it. I worked in England after medicine, and then came back to South Africa, and then went to America and worked there, and then came back to South Africa, and so I wasn't settled for a very long time.
You left South Africa quite soon. Why did you leave?
Because I had a choice between going to 1 artillery battalion in Potchefstroom or going to do a PhD in London. And I didn't have to think that one through very, really long.
Did you ever go back and do the army?
By the time I came, I spent 3 years in London doing my PhD, then came back for a year, and the army only woke up at the end of that year that I was back in South Africa. So by that time I had my American money and trip sorted and job. So I went over there for 3.5 years, and I came back married with a child, and that's my American daughter. So the army wanted me then, and fortunately, a guy who worked 1 floor down from me at Tygerberg was big mates, a hunting friend of the chief, the medical the head of the medical corps, and with a suitable number of letters back and forth, my knee had been damaged and I had a child and a wife and it would be very disruptive and I was doing important research, and so they gave me exemption. But I was 33, 34 by then.
Wow.
And
So
I
that
was
would have been
getting a bit
mid-80s?
too old for it. This would have been 80, yeah, 89 or 90, somewhere there.
Okay. When did you go to New Zealand?
So I spent 12 years, I think, working at Tygerberg, and a lot of things happened there, but in the end, I wanted to be the head of the department, and there was no way they were going to do that because I wouldn't give lectures in Afrikaans, and I had longer hair that the registrar thought showed that I was a friend of Mandela, which I wasn't anyway, but I just had long hair. And so, and then I got pissed off and I got wind of something Stellenbosch University was doing with some property in Belleville, and I blew the lid off it. And that was open warfare between me and the Broederbond. Yeah, that was massive. I don't know if you know, there was a magazine called Nose or Nose Week.
Yes.
In South Africa. Yeah. One of the issues profiled this whole business. There was land in Belleville given to the university on condition they built a satellite campus, and they decided that they were just going to build a shopping centre, and they reckoned they could get R1 billion out of it. Well, no, so 400 million rand, and they were on their way to building a R1 billion endowment fund, mostly so that they could say up yours to the ANC when the ANC came to power. And yeah, I stopped it, and it was pretty scary even for a while. I had some senior people visiting me, and round about the same time there was that senior minister in the Nidgeref church who was shot in the back of the head while he was watching TV with his grandchildren. So yeah, it was somewhat hairy. Not that it scared me, to be honest, but they suspended me from my position at Tygerberg, so they wouldn't allow me in the building. So even though they paid me, they wouldn't allow me in the building. And yeah, I had meetings with the rector, what was his name? Van Wyk, I think at the time. He was the chief Broederbonder, at the same as being the rector or the vice rector of Stellenbosch University. I had meetings with the deans, blah. And in fact, in the end, I called down the provincial fraud squad on the head of my department. So it was just open war. And my dad said to me, not only because of that, he said, Michael, you need to get out of this country. This country is going to the dogs, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And I said to him, well, I've worked in America, I don't want to go back. I've worked in England, I don't want to go there. I've been to work briefly in Australia, I don't like Australians. That's changed, by the way. I said, New Zealand? I've never been to New Zealand. He said, I'll buy you a ticket. Here's the money. Ticket. He paid an immigration agent to process me, and he said, go fly there, find a job. And long story short, in the end, I found one. And yeah, that was 1995. In 1996, with a bit of pressure from them, I came here. And that's been here most of the time, although I spent 5 years in the Sunshine Coast in between.
Wow.
So, but I'm pretty settled here now. I'm a virologist and a GP. So those are two different specialities. I like being a GP. As a youngster, I could never have been a GP. Not only shy, but disinterested in people, and a touch of autism. I mean, I'm not autistic, but a touch of autism in my behavior anyway. And yeah, what is it, 40 years later? I'm really fascinated by people. I connect with them very quickly. That's how you change. So as I got more senior, I would have more and more people reporting to me. And that means you have to develop the skills to understand what people are wanting and, accommodate them as necessary as possible and discipline them as necessary. So You have to develop, you have to hone those skills of communication and insight, empathy, because otherwise, yes, you're just blundering along.
How did
So in America, I was working for myself, but with other people in the laboratory. Came to South Africa, and I then had a team of sort of 11 or 12 working under me. When I came to New Zealand, I was called the medical director, which was supposedly the number 2 position in a company with 100 people. So that was, okay, 96, round about 2000, I guess. The guy who was running the allergy clinic left, and they told me I had to do it. And I wasn't very keen, but they said, A, you've got to do it, and B, we'll pay you more. I said, well, now you're playing my tune. And yeah, that was the start of my introduction to clinical medicine. Oh, the other thing, of course, my job at MedLab, this company that I was medical director at, in one of my duties was to get to know all the GPs who used us as for testing, laboratory testing. And so basically I met once a year with every one of the 400 or so GPs in the Waikato. And that required, I had to learn a lot about, what do you call it, customer relations. So that also, so there's the clinical, there's customer relations, there's just maturity, understanding yourself better. That's important, isn't it? When I was about 35, I had a major confluence of disasters in my life. Relationships breaking down, children overseas, the trouble at the university. And I remember sitting on my bed one afternoon and saying to myself, I've got a choice. I can either get depressed by all this, because I could feel it coming on. The pressure was just too much. Or I can take responsibility for everything that's happened and work on solutions. And it was the beginning of, I think I spent a year going to a therapist. And, it's the beginning of understanding yourself, which makes it easier to understand others. So that was important too. So it's all these different rivulets gathering together and creating a skill. One of the things I had to do as interviewing for the job in New Zealand was to fill in this character, assessment type thing. And came up very strongly on leadership and entrepreneurship. I'm a leader because I just, like I say, charge ahead. I think it's quite a good idea to go over there, and I just go for it. And the blackberry and the cliff and the minefields in the way are secondary considerations. Yeah, I mean, forcing people can work briefly, but it doesn't work for long. The leadership is all about getting somebody who wants helping somebody who wants something to get it. Those are the kind of leaders that people like. And that comes back to your idea about the privilege that we grew up under. People expect people to listen to me. It's ingrained in me. And also being the eldest, it helps. I mean, the first few years I was here, my nickname or my at MedLab was that bloody South African.
Why?
I think because, if I decided that something should be done or was a good idea, I pushed forward. And if there was resistance, I just shifted down a gear or two, pushed some more. And my first gear was just way more powerful than anybody else's first gear. So they either liked it or lumped it. Well, I think moving countries, the type of person who does it, firstly, I tend to think of them as the cream of the cream. They not only got talent, but they have the drive and the adaptability to want something and to put up with the negatives in order to get to that goal. Secondly, I think moving countries is quite rejuvenating, keeps you young because of the challenges, because you have to sweep away your network, create new ones. You have to carry your sense of purpose with you. It's that you're in purpose by what's around you. So, I think, I've always said that you've got to immigrate to a new country because you're going to something, not because you're running away from something. South Africans who left South Africa because they hated it, so many of them just went back, didn't make it. It's because, yeah, they were looking at the negatives, not the positives. So, yeah, and I landed here really, I mean, it's a beautiful country. I had a good job. I met my wife in the office next door. You know, I'm very, very happy here. It was a good. New Zealand is I don't know the numbers, but there must be at least a quarter of the people here are immigrants. And it's a small country. It really is small. I mean, it's a lot smaller than Sydney in terms of population. So it's a very cozy little country. And I've never sought out other South Africans because they were South African. I know a few South Africans because there are just lots of them around. Well, I had that bloody South African. It didn't help that I arrived in 96 after the World Cup in 95. There was quite a bit of ill feeling still around. And in fact, one of the first things I did with the lab was go on a social club meeting up to Auckland, and we stopped at a pub along the way where a rugby match was going on between South Africa and the All Blacks, and I took a lot of flack. The Springboks lost, of course. Maybe that was a saving grace for me. Once again, it's because there's a selection, you see. You only take people who are skilled and motivated. You tend to think, oh, all South Africans must be amazing people.